Hello, dear viewers. Welcome to the second episode of the series, The Ledger. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single episode of this series in which the Ledger curses its victims, turning them into animals. Enjoy the show.
All fortunes in the world are nothing but hungers dressed up in a suit. Men make their empires as animals make their nests, in a frenzied manner and constantly sure that the next possession is going to satisfy. They never do. I have collected quite a number of such men, and I hold them between the pages of my book, all of them ultimately narrowed down to the one desire that ate them up. Tonight, a candle flickers near my spine, and my ink moves, for another hungry soul signs where he must have read the writing on the wall. This is entry number 2. He was named Julian Roth, a man of 48 who hadn't eaten his fill since he was 26. He purchased companies like most people breathed. They came without thought and without end, and without ever getting the taste of anything that he consumed. Factories, mansions, paintings, all were eaten by him and gone the following morning. The world, to Julian, was not some place where one lived, but inventory, and everybody who inhabited it was worth some amount that he couldn't keep himself from seeing. "Everybody has a price," he used to say. "It's just that you don't know it yet." During that time, Julian was devouring the leftovers of a bankrupt auction firm. Julian preferred these kinds of smaller and more ruthless feasts. Hidden at the end of its list of things that were being sold off, Lot 0, leather book, contents unknown, was I. The clause that came along with me dated back even earlier than the firm itself, in writing whose age nobody knew. The man who signed the document claimed possession of everything inside. Julian saw only one word glowing before him: everything. He called me to his office up in his glass tower, and, with the icy disdain of one thinking he is looking at something far below him, he analyzed me. Almost worthless, his instinct told him, and that was the very instinct that made him wealthy. Yet ownership was still ownership, and Julian did not leave anything behind. He unclasped his gold pen, found the line for the acquisition, and signed on the dotted line, taking it all. The ink gleamed and then seeped into my paper like water soaking into desert soil. He didn't feel anything. They never do. He just got the wrong side of the equation. It is always about the reward. It begins as a murmur, then becomes an echoing roar. At midnight, the property that he had built from nothing for mere pennies was worth 3 times as much, and by 2 o'clock in the morning, it was 3 times that amount again. The cash kept flowing into his account so fast that his computer could not cope, figures of green rolling up the wall like leaves. And with the cash came something more. There was a feeling in his shoulder muscles, a power that glowed inside of him like the sunrise on the horizon. Did it frighten him? No way. He loosened his tie, filled a glass of scotch, and raised it to the twinkling city beyond. "That," he said to the skyscrapers with a smile, "is the taste of victory." However, even this power came with a price, one which hung heavy with hunger. Not the typical feeling of an empty stomach, but something far greater, an endless abyss within him. He conjured food before stuffing it all in with both his hands, but he still wasn't full. He demanded more. He ate it too, but the abyss remained gaping open. Stood in his pristine office, crumbs sprinkled on a $5,000 suit, success came with a sense of confusion. "God," he mumbled while still reaching out for food, "I am starving." I had just increased the volume of his existing hunger. The first of the bristles made their appearance as early as the morning light. Before he saw them, he felt them on his forearms and his neck, a scratchy feeling prickling him. He pulled up a neatly pressed sleeve and stopped, frozen in horror. There were dark, coarse, wiry bristles sprouting from his skin, thick as fishing wire, and underneath the bristles, his skin was coarse and gray. He scratched harder, and more bristles emerged. It was whispered in a cold voice that there was something terribly wrong about this whole scenario. Julian silenced that voice, just like he silences everybody else. This is the first fact that I write down next to each and every rich name that belongs to my list. The man who knows the value of everything is easy to buy. Julian thought that there would never be any price on him, that he would always be the buyer and never the merchandise. But a man who will keep on wanting more can be made to go anywhere bit by bit till his death, and smiling the whole way. He was sitting at his desk when the sun was rising and putting food into his mouth with one hand and browsing his skyrocketing stocks with the other. I had paid my price in full in him. His eyes tracked it, entering the darkness of a screen. Those steely gray eyes that had unsettled players in 3 different continents began to reduce, constrict, sink into the growing grayness of his face until they became tiny and black and beady, spaced wide apart. Hog's eyes. Hog's hungry gaze. He turned abruptly from the window. "No," he murmured, and the words seemed awkward and somehow inappropriate when he spoke it. "Make this go away. I don't care what you have to do. I'll pay. I'll pay whoever." But there was no one left to pay anymore. The next thing was pressure in his jaw, a pain that split from deep inside and pushed his face forward. His nose spread and flattened, becoming gray and wide, while his handsome but cruel face turned into something more blunt and barbaric. His jaw protruded, and hair began growing in thick strands from his cheeks. He grasped his face with both hands, holding it firmly in an attempt to retain himself, while at the same time he realized how the man he used to be was transforming into what he himself had called animal. And then the tusks came. Using a crushing force that made his knees give way, the 2 elongated tusks of ivory penetrated his lower jaw and emerged into the light of the gray morning sky. Julian let out a scream that began to turn into a squeal. And that is the second truth that I write alongside every buried fortune. Greed had never been a matter of possession. It had been a matter of never feeling sated. He had lived 20 years with a hollow pit in his chest that he had mistakenly labeled ambition. And so I showed him what his greed really looked like. The worst robbery came from his hands, from a man who had signed so many parts of the world away through them. He looked at them in front of his little dark eyes as his fingers fattened and grew closer, 2 by 2, his polished nails becoming darker and spreading until his smart hands became heavy and blunt and cloven hooves. Hairs grew on his wrists and covered the wrists, hiding his cufflinks. He attempted to clench a fist that had hammered on tables, that had held a pen that had bankrupted businesses, but the hooves clicked ineffectually together. That is when his body started to inflate. His shoulders grew tense, his back curved from new muscle in all its rawness, and he became bulky, bending forward in a manner that was both formidable and disturbing. Dark and coarse gray bristles sprouted from his chest and back. His magnificent suit, made by hand, his shield of power, tightened around the enlarging figure and tore like paper at every stitch. He stood there, in his shredded tailoring, seeing his city's greatest man being transformed into the body of a pig. It developed incredibly fast, his roughened hide covered with its thick fur coat. In the place of his skin, the skin which he once used to get massages on the roofs of penthouses, and which was covered by the most expensive fabrics that money could buy, there were now coarse boar hide, dark, impenetrable, and covering all his hunched, massive body. He ran his cloven hooves along his body and felt nothing human underneath it. His whole surrounding world had changed completely, and everything smelled of something new, unimaginable for his former nose, and everything was edible for him. Julian realized deep inside the animal that he was not wearing this body. He was this body. They changed shape, much to his surprise, with unusual gentleness. They ascended up his head, taking the form of 2 erect, pointed, and hairy boar's ears, turning in response to every noise around them. The office reverberated with sounds that were new to him, the buzzing of the lights, the roar of an awakening city. More hairs covered his head, wrapping around the last of his neat black hair. With a cloven hoof, he touched his new ear and emitted a Everything that had been his as a man was now being reclaimed from him, and he did not have anyone to appeal to. It was his legs that went last, taking his dignity along with them. The heavy muscles of bristles in his thighs strained. His feet grew thick and split, the soft leather of his boots cracking as his toes formed blunt, hooved feet. His trousers tore as his spine formed a small tail which moved about from his back. His balance shifted lower, and for an untamed instant, he struggled to remain standing on 2 feet. Julian Roth would never kneel before anyone. And then he fell to all 4s. He tried to speak. He had to give an order, name a price, summon the army that had always come running when he called. He lifted his great bristled head and forced the old words up through a throat that no longer fit them. "Name your It came out thick and guttural, then broke into a long, wet, ragged that echoed off the glass walls of his empire. He pressed a cloven hoof to his throat and felt the human voice dying there. The phrase that had made him a god, "Name your price," was the last thing his mouth ever tried to say. It came out as the of livestock. Still, he tried to save himself the only way he knew. He fumbled his phone off the desk with a clumsy cloven hoof, meaning to call security, his assistant, anyone, to pay someone to make it stop. The glass skittered under hooves that could no longer feel it. He pinned it, jabbed at it, lowered his snout to the speaker. "Security, help!" There were no words left, only and the phone tumbled from his grip and clattered to the floor. Julian Roth, who had commanded thousands, who had never once been unable to summon help, could not call a single soul. He sank against his desk and pressed his cloven hooves to the sides of his great bristled head and fought me the way they all fight me, with memory. His name, the taste of victory, the weight of a pen, the electric joy of a number going up and up. All of it thinning now, drifting out of reach like a signal leaving range. Beneath it rose something older and far more patient. The hunger, the flat contentment of a thing that wants only to eat and root and be. "I am Julian Roth," he thought, clinging to it. But he could no longer be certain which of the 2 things inside him was thinking. And now the third truth, the one that levels every empire I have buried. You can own the whole world and still end up as livestock in it. Near dawn, he reared up and faced the great glass window and saw his reflection whole for the first time. A colossal, bristled boar in the tatters of a designer suit, tusked and hunched and monstrous, in an office registered to a man who no longer existed. He raised one cloven hoof toward the glass, and the beast raised one too. He searched that terrible shape for Julian Roth and found him only in the eyes, small now and dark and drowning. Somewhere in the last gray hour before sunrise, the fighting simply stopped. Not surrender, settlement, the only language Julian had ever truly spoken. He settled onto all 4s with a heavy ease, his great head dropping low along the marble for anything edible. The panic cooled into a flat, brute calm. The hunger remained. I left him that. I am not without a sense of humor, but it was simple now, clean and content, no longer dressed up as ambition. He, to the window, watched the sunrise pour gold across a skyline he had once believed he owned, and wanted nothing from it but breakfast. By full sunrise, the transformation was complete, and the thing that had been Julian Roth stood at the center of his ruined glass empire, the largest, finest, most magnificent boar the world had ever seen. Bristled and tusked and vast, he filled the office, small dark eyes glinting, the last shreds of his suit hanging from his enormous frame. He was powerful. He was, in his monstrous way, even beautiful. And he was, at long last and forever, exactly what his hunger had always been beneath the tailoring. An animal built to consume, In a tower it no longer understood it had bought. In the quiet of the emptying office, my pages stirred and settled, and his entry dried upon them. Signature, flaw, payment, balance. I have collected merchant princes and robber barons, tyrants and tycoons, and I will tell you what I told each as they knelt. I have never once taken anything that was not freely offered. He read the clause. He signed the line. He claimed everything within, exactly as the page invited him to, and everything within claimed him right back. That is the entire art of it. The candle guttered low beside my closing cover. Entry number 2, paid in full. You may wonder what becomes of a man who bought the world and became its livestock. I will tell you, for the ending is my favorite kind, the kind he wrote himself. The auction house he devoured did not die with him. It reopened under new ownership, and its very first sale featured a single extraordinary item. Lot 1, a prize boar, magnificent, provenance unknown. The man who had spent his life certain that everyone had a price, at last received one of his own. The bidding was fierce. He sold for a staggering sum. He always did know how to move inventory. But enough of him. My candle has been relit, and already my quill is moving on its own, because the ink chooses far faster than I can tell these tales. A fresh page, a new heading, drying in glowing ink. Entry number 3. The silhouette forming beneath it is a woman this time, slender and laughing, one finger raised to point in cruel delight at someone I cannot yet see. She has spent her whole life laughing at the fallen, the failing, the ones she decided had it coming. Soon she will make a sound she cannot stop, and her grinning shadow, I notice, already has too many teeth. The ledger disagrees with her, and the ledger never runs out of pages.